Welcome to Just Minding My Business. I hope you're having an amazing day. And our guest today has almost 25 years of experience as a financial advising professional. Jeff Panik knows that his job is to help clients strike a balance between living well today and planning for the future. Jeff is the founder of Balance Wealth Partners, and his simple goal in mind is to just create tailored plans for intentional living. So, welcome, Jeff. I am
Thank
so
you.
happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. So, I like intentional living. I
It's
like
what
that.
everybody wants, right? Intentional living.
Absolutely.
Huh.
So, at Balance Wealth Partners, how do you help people with intentional living?
I really, I think whether you're starting out or whether you're approaching retirement or in retirement, I think most people would view their lives as almost like a puzzle. And really, it's a matter of kind of putting the pieces together and taking the time to understand what the puzzle, even when you put the pieces together, you may not understand what the result is. With a lot of things these days with Social Security and Medicare and just life situations, it's really important to have someone who knows your situation and has your best interest in mind. And Google's good for search results and finding things, but in some ways it can be a bit overwhelming and doesn't always have your best interest in mind in terms of some of the sponsored ads and things on there if you look at financial topics and other things.
Absolutely. And most people really don't understand all the nuances that are involved with planning.
We call it financial jargon. That would be in one of the books I have a financial jargon chapter that just goes through and explains all the terms because they are sometimes I think people get behind the terms, and then once you start bringing up things, if you're not sure what it is, it just makes it even further difficult to understand, and really kind of work through whatever plan or whatever you're trying to do, to get to the end result.
Absolutely. And let's talk about your books. I know before we went on air, you were telling me you have a book coming out and you have a book that you've already published. So let's
Yes.
let's get into it.
Sure. Yes. So the first book I published was about a year and a half ago, and it's specifically for young adults. And really, it's designed to be an introductory guide to managing finances. Because what I found, most people getting out of high school, college, technical, trade school, they have to start making all these decisions, whether it's about, whether you buy or lease a car, whether what type of insurance you get, are you going to buy a home, rent, how long? Credit cards, all these things, what kind of bank account and the education system really, consumer finance, they really don't teach that. So the purpose of the book really was to provide a template for someone that really wasn't, didn't really have any financial experience. And my background was that I first in my family go to college and went to college. I ended up with a bunch of student loans, and I ended up getting a notice from Sally Mae that said I owed $1,000 a month for the next 10 years. That was probably about 30 plus years ago. I ended up going in the Army for a bunch of years, and they ended up paying off and forgiving my loan as part of the service. But it was really kind of a wake up call for me. And I look now and say, when I was looking at writing a book, I thought about my experience and I thought I could write something that would help people that were in my situation or are now.
Yes. And what's the title of that book?
It's called Your Future is Now, and it's an introductory guide to managing your finances.
And I think that's so important because one of the things they don't teach us that in school
No.
at all. And I know back in the day, going to college, every credit card company
Huh.
was sending college students
Yes.
credit, and they didn't even have a job.
Yeah, well, you look at if you turn on during the weekends for college football and a lot of these other things, half the commercial are credit card commercials. And you go to if you go to a university bookstore, there's no shortage of credit card offers for people selling credit cards right outside. So it's easy to get over your head before you even know you're over your head, and
Yeah,
that's really a challenge for people. And there's certain people where they learn money lessons but for a lot of people these days, it's really finding it out the hard way. And really, the longer that it takes you to figure it out and pay down, especially if you have a bunch of student loans and you have credit cards, it's going to be very difficult to do things that we used to take for granted, like home formation, buying a home, buying a car, doing things that people used to take for granted. Having all that on the front end makes it just very difficult to do simple things that people, like I said, used to take for granted.
absolutely. So what can younger folks get from the book? Just
Yeah, so I think really it's really designed to be almost a reference because it's not like all of these things come all at one time. It's really a matter where they come at different in a time frame. I would say typically within the first 3 years of when you become independent. Whether it's you start working for your employer, what type of health plan do you get? There's not really anything. They can give you a document that's probably about 300 pages, and it's really hard to course through. If you're setting up a retirement plan, what do you do there? What even is that? And so there's chapters and it's built out really to try to help. It also provides examples and hypotheticals so that someone that isn't really sure or needs some more background could kind of learn from someone else's situation, a hypothetical example, and can kind of work through their own. And there's QR codes built into the book so they take you to calculators that can be helpful, whether it's about budgeting, whether it's about saving, or even just how you manage debt.
that's so critical. So how can people get the book?
Sure, that book is on Amazon, or both books are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anywhere books are sold. And for your viewers, I can I can get you the link where I can just offer it as a free book for you. So there'll be a PDF where they can just pull up your viewers if they are interested, they could pull it up as a PDF. And they can just take it as a free book because I think it's invaluable and helpful. That's why it was written to be really try to help people that I'm very sympathetic to because I came from that situation where, my mother raised me a single mother and, it was very difficult. And, going to college, you think you have it made, but then you realize, you signed all these documents and now you have to pay for a bunch of student loans that that your salary that you're coming out with doesn't necessarily account for.
Absolutely. And that's the reality. You know,
Yes.
a lot of times people think they go to college and they're going to make all this
Huh.
money, and it is nothing like that.
No.
No, because I mean, I remember coming out of college, and do you have experience? No, I do not. I just graduated.
And that's the other thing. The book is also designed for the parent, really talking about how they can better prepare the young adult for life. There's a section at that back that really talks about foundational tips. Whether it's if you're thinking about a career, maybe do an internship before you start down the road of putting that as your major. And I always use the example, it's like if you want to be a nurse and you've never been to a hospital, haven't been anywhere there, and you go, if you go for an internship and you realize you don't like blood, probably not the best job. And so it really is designed where it talks about even education. There's a lot of things you can do to try to minimize student loans, kind of talking about it and just really helping the young adult to get to the point where they can be financially independent. And a lot of times it's a matter, the conversation doesn't start in 6 months before graduation. It should start, when they're 8 or 9, just learning things that a lot of people would take for granted. Even just simple things like playing games over, holidays, life, Monopoly. It's amazing if you play games, the amount of lessons that you can take from those games.
Very, very true. Because I remember, my kid at 4 or 5, I used to have to spell McDonald's, because if I said that word, it's like he knew what that was. And
Yes.
then we had to have the conversation about everything he saw on TV he wanted.
Yes.
We had to have that conversation.
Yes. And that's the biggest thing I think is that you see the influencers and the people on social media where they just appear like it's just simple. You know, it's simple to have all these rental properties, or it's simple to have all these fancy cars or do all these things. You know, it's really not. And if you believe that, that's not the way to go about it. I mean, it comes most people get these things or get those things from hard work, and that's sometimes people try to get around it, but there's not a good way usually to get around that.
True, true that. And tons of mistakes
Yes. Yes.
and heartaches, and
Yeah.
nothing's easy. And that's what they need to understand.
No, and that's one of the pieces, just kind of like the parent talking about the mistakes that they've made, really getting back to kind of humility and just really working through where there's a lot of lessons that you can teach your children from your mistakes so they don't repeat them. And I think, that also humanizes you where they understand that you're not perfect and that if you can make mistakes, they definitely can. And so they'll maybe pay a little bit more attention.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes kids, you know how they are. You don't know anything, that attitude.
Yes. Yes, that's yeah, especially if they want something, that's where you definitely don't know anything. So, especially
Yes,
especially like, with relationships, if they're getting in relationships and you think it's a bad mix or a bad match, they know everything and you just say, well, just wait. One day you'll say I'm right.
yes, absolutely. And it seems like once they turn 30, then you kind of know something.
Yes. Well, your brain, it takes, I think, your brain a while to develop. And I think there's a lot of decisions that have to be made well before that. And the education system, these kids have all kinds of elective classes they take, but something like financial literacy, they just don't really focus on. I think only 22 of 50 states have it as a mandate to graduate, and there's a lot of waivers with that as well. And there's just things that are basic that people used to take for granted, like writing a check. Most kids, 15, 16, 17, 18-year olds, they don't know how to even do that. And
Yeah,
so you have to build the basics before you can get more advanced and go, get into the next level. And unfortunately, if your parents don't teach you and you're not in a situation where they work with you to learn finances and consumer finance, you're going to be really at a disadvantage. And I compare it to like a marathon, where there's some people that start at mile 6 or 7, and then there's other people that gun goes off and you're just standing at the starting line, just waiting for somebody to tell you what to do.
true, very true. So, your other book, let's talk a little bit about
Yes.
that. What's that title?
So that is Your Future Is Now, a guide to building your retirement puzzle or putting your puzzle together. And so really that book is designed for pre-retirees and people nearing in or near retirement, really to kind of say, if you spent 30, 40 years working in some cases and you've accumulated things, it's like kind of like when you go to move after living somewhere for 20 or 30 years. You don't know how many things you have and how you're going to get them in all the boxes. Really, it's the same thing with retirement. It's you have all these different things. A lot of times they work differently. You have coworkers, family members, friends that may say you need to do this or do that, but they have no idea of what your specific situation is. And really, it's a matter of I call it. I have what I call the financial life inventory plan. And the purpose of that is really to take inventory of your life and really go through. It's a checklist, really, to go through and put yourself in a position so you can understand what you have, because that's really the basis to kind of move forward, even when we start planning and looking at things, because you want to take inventory and understand all the pieces before you start putting them together.
Absolutely. And for most people, they definitely need help with that, because once they look at everything they have, it's like, now what?
No, I mean, and and the other thing I always bring up as well is it's not something that's a one and done. It's something that you have to do on an ongoing basis. Whether you're going into retirement and you're looking at Medicare, whether you're looking at how you manage your Social Security, what kind of health benefits do you have, whether you have retiree health benefits, whether you have to get Medicare supplement. There's a lot of things, and that is really a continued item along a long time where you just don't want to just do it one time and then forget about it. Whether it's changing your beneficiaries if there's a life event, or whether it's just making sure that there's just not money out there that you could claim that you're not aware of.
Yes, you're so right because I mean, I'm semi-retired
Hmm.
and having to fill out that paperwork alone, it's like you need help with that. It is just unreal. And then now they're making it so it's computerized,
Yes.
and a lot of people entering into the retirement arena, they barely know how to work the computer.
Yeah, and it's, and some of these decisions that are being made, especially around Medicare, if you don't make your decision with the prescription drug and some of these things at the right time, there are penalties involved that can
Mhm.
be irreversible. So it's just very important to really go in with your eyes wide open and making sure you're making informed decisions and approaching retirements like, you know, a lot of people are finished with, the children are out of the house, they're raised, they're not, where you're having to pay money every month for their education and to take care of them. So where does that money go? And that's another thing. Does it go to your debt? Does it go to savings? Or does it do to some sort of combination? And that really is a period of time, especially a lot of people pre-retirees, they usually will have 3 to 5, 6, 7 years before really retiring or really slowing down, where they retire. And it's a matter of understanding where you're at and what you need to do to if in case you need to course correct or make changes. And I think the more that you know or the more that you can understand, the better off you will be in the long run. And that book is the same where there's QR codes, there's hypothetical examples that talk about, Social Security, Medicare, insurance, uh, you know, even with talking about car buying, managing debt, putting together a budget. That's the other thing, whether you're a young adult or someone going into retirement, those are two periods of time where you're going through change. And it's important really to understand what your budget is. If you're paying for two or three of the same subscription services, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Netflix, all these things, you want to basically pare those back and make sure you understand where all the money's going and what's going to be coming in.
And that's important throughout life because
Yes.
oh, this is great. Next thing you know, you done subscribe, you paying for it.
Yes.
It's like, do I really, really need this?
Ah,
You know what I'm saying? You have to do an
exactly.
assessment
Yes.
because it's just important like you said, it's not
Mhm.
one and done. It's a
Yes.
constant behavior
Hmm.
for sure. So at Balance Wealth Partners, how do you give us a day in the office with a client?
Sure. I mean, and I have staff that help me with everything. So it's like everything else. I mean, you have to surround yourself with good people and you have to have them obviously understand kind of what the buy-in for the company is, what you're trying to do. By
Yes.
doing that, they can kind of understand the direction of things. And really, it's a matter of just trying to work with clients and, doing reviews on an ongoing basis, but also there's always things, life events that come up, whether it's a death, divorce, whether somebody's trying to buy a home and they need to get fund. There's always something. So it's
Mhm.
really a matter from a service perspective and making sure that if someone reaches out, a client, that they get a call back or someone answers the phone and that they can help them and meet their need, whatever it is, or try to help them point them in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. So how do people connect with you?
Oh, sure. So I'm on LinkedIn as well as I have a website, The Balance Wealth Partners. I also have jeffreypanik.com, which has the book information. There's a lot of helpful videos on there from topics like Social Security, Medicare, just talking about things in a fashion where they're usually going to be about a 1 to 3 minute video with little snippets. So it allows you really to look at it, whether you're watch, you can even look at they're closed captions, so you can see kind of you don't have to listen to my voice, and you can kind of get some information in a very short amount of time, but they're designed to be useful, helpful, and educational.
Yes, and since we talking about the Medicare situation, I guess everybody knows what's happening in the news right now.
Mhm.
Does your company stay on top of the changes and different things that could affect?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is even with Social Security now, if your income is if your income is below certain thresholds now, you're not going to be in a position where you have to pay Social Security taxes on your Social Security. So for a lot of people, it's going to be a nice amount of money that they have coming in that some people aren't even aware of. But, really, there's always things that are constantly changing. It's important, especially if you're around. So for an individual, it's typically going to be less than 75,000 in income, and for a couple, less than 150. If you can stay below that, in most cases, your Social Security is not going to be taxed. And so the benefit of that is, that could be significant savings. So you want to understand what your other investments and other things are doing so that you can really focus on staying below that. The other thing on the Medicare side is really more on I would say on the prescription side. You always want to evaluate your Medicare plan each year, especially if your prescriptions change, or in a lot of cases, the provider will change the tier of your prescriptions. So it's just unfortunate that it's so complicated. The Medicare system for people that are aging, it should have been designed, much more simple, and it's anything but. It's like the alphabet soup at this point of different plans and everything else.
For sure, it's for sure because I remember having to get some help because I'm like,
Mhm.
you first enter into these platforms, it's
Yes.
like walk, walk, walk.
Yes.
What in
Yes.
the world is all this jargon?
No, and you can pull the government forms, and the form numbers, they're probably about a 20-30 page package of things that you
Yes,
can kind of browse through and kind of realize that it might probably be good for a cold day in a fireplace. So
yes, and some help.
yes, yes, yes.
For sure, because things are moving at the speed of lightning, constantly moving, and having someone that you can trust to navigate you through is invaluable. It's just, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's probably more important now than ever, even with all the technology advances and all the productivity and everything that you can get out of technology. There's a lot of generalizations. It's easy to, look up these things, but the web searches, they can't really get your specific situation in mind, given all the pieces that are involved. And that's really, I think, where it's important to have someone that can help you and be on the same side of the table as you.
yes, absolutely. You can't get around it nowadays. You really
Mhm.
can't. You have to have someone that understands you, first of all,
Mhm.
and then matches your situation with the availability of things
Yeah,
and what works best for you.
exactly. And everyone's different, their vision. It's really, I mean, the other thing I look at in the first chapter of the pre-retired book is really a lot of it talks about goals and your vision. You really want to factor what your goals are going into retirement, where you just don't flip a switch and one day you're retired. You need to have some planning around what you want to do. You've worked your whole life. It's important to kind of have a strategy, and like kind of like you're doing, it's very popular where you look at a downshifting, where you just slow down, but you keep going. I
Mm.
think sometimes for someone that is very active, working, a lot of hours a week, the worst thing they can do is just stop. And I use the example of saying, well, I'm going to play golf or I'm going to garden, and you do that for a couple of weeks and you realize you hate it after you're retired. And it's important to have those hobbies, goals. Really, the other thing I would say is really an accountability partner, someone that is with you, whether they're retiring at the same time. In a lot of cases, it's sometimes even better for it not to be a spouse, someone that has common interests,
Mm.
where you can kind of work through. I use the example of lifelong learning. There's several, 3 or 4 different websites you can go to that offer lifelong learning courses where you can learn new things. So I think the important thing with your brain and just being, it's a muscle, so you have to use it. And so I think having all these the technology is great, but it's a matter of utilizing where it benefits you and doesn't just put you in kind of a corner where you're just sitting there watching the news, waiting for the world to end. That's so I think really it's a matter of kind of finding what you enjoy, your family, hobbies, and then, working through to get to the point where you can do that on a daily basis rather than having to go in and work. And if you're happy with your work, it's a good idea to continue and kind of work overtime and transition.
Yes, yes. And I think you're so right. I mean, the days of retiring and sitting home, they're pretty much over for a lot of retirees. They either started their second act
And which
before they
is
left
that's
it.
a great way to call it, and I think that's the way more people need to look at it. And unfortunately, the people that are sitting at home, that's the worst thing that you can do for your memory, for your body. It's like health. It's not just taking a financial check of yourself, it's taking a health check of yourself as well before you get to the point of retiring, because there's a lot of things. I use the example of, if you have a corporate dental plan, it will cover a lot more than when you're off of that and you're on the Medicare, where really you're having to pay out of pocket. So a lot of these things, if you can plan for, you can utilize your benefits while you need them, as opposed to waiting till they're gone and then you have to come out of pocket with a bunch of money that is further going to draw down your savings.
True, true. So it's so much to think about. So much to think about.
It is, and that I think is the other piece. The one thing you never want to do is say, I'm going to solve this in a weekend. It's really a 6 to 12 month process, really to get everything together, go through a process-driven approach where you can get from not really sure where you stand to being confident. And then that doesn't is not something where it's just a one and done, as I mentioned before. Really, you want to look on an ongoing basis to make sure things are going the way they should be, and if they need to make changes, there need to be changes, rather than just kind of not paying attention.
Absolutely. So if people want to connect with you, Jeff, get the book and connect with you, how do they do so?
Yes. So, if you go to the Balance Wealth Partners site, or if you go to jeffreypanik.com, there's my information on there, my contact information. And as I mentioned, I'll provide you with the free book, young adult book. I think it's good for anyone, that is, whether it's a parent or a young adult, where at least it can kind of point them in the right direction as a reference. Because there's so many things that are hard to figure out. Even like if you're young, I look at even myself, it's like, well, what is comprehensive coverage for a car? What is an umbrella policy? What are things that it's not, it's there for the rainy day, the umbrella policy, but what is it and should I have it and how do I get it? So these are all things that the book tries to lay out in a way that it doesn't overwhelm you with a bunch of financial jargon, and makes it so that you can look at it and say, oh, well, this is what this is, and then work from there.
Yes, absolutely. So you kind of keep it nice and simple for people.
Try, that I think if you can do that, that's what my goal is. And it's difficult sometimes with things, but that's what it goes back to, as well as I use examples and hypotheticals of circumstances. If somebody's looking at Social Security in the second book, I have two or three different scenarios where someone goes through the process of applying and getting Social Security. The other thing I look at is your credit, identity theft. There's chapters on that,
Mm.
talking about how you manage your credit, how do you protect yourself against identity theft. So that I walk through that so someone could just go through the process from start to finish of putting themselves in a better financial position as it relates to just doing things that will help prevent a lot of probably harm later.
Yes, and cybersecurity, that's a huge,
Yes.
huge, huge.
Yes.
And a lot of times seniors are the targets.
Yeah, that's the two main groups are seniors and children, mainly because it's easy, with the children, nobody's monitoring their credit typically. And it's in the books I always talk about it's important to freeze their credit, because you don't want to go on for 5, 6, 7, 10 years and then they go to apply for credit and they have this history because there's fraud, and then
Right.
you have to go back and try to figure it all out. and it just can be very costly and very it's stressful to say the least.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow. This has been amazing, Jeff. You have
Thank you.
really opened my eyes, and I'm sure my audience's eyes, to things that you need to, be thinking about, not just for if you're getting ready to enter retirement, but also in raising your children
Mhm.
to be financially literate.
Yes. Yeah, and I think if you can, and there's things you can do, and I think it's just a matter, everyone has a finite amount of time. That's the one thing that we only have so much of. I wish I could find like an eighth day. It would be great because I would have like I would be even more efficient, but then I want a ninth day. That's the problem. It's you can never get enough. And
Sure.
really with time, you want to try to maximize it and make sure the time you spend with them, they can learn from you because it's all, as you know, a blink of an eye with children. Before you know it, you see them when they're an infant, and then they're taller than you. So
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because I see that with my son. I mean,
yes.
I remember when he was a baby, and now I gotta do this, I gotta look up.
That's
So you are so right. Wow. So you have definitely dropped some good information on us today.
Thank you.
I have definitely appreciated, and I know my audience appreciates it as well. So I thank you so much, Jeff, for coming by and sharing your wisdom with all of us.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Absolutely. Thank you.